exodus young people from the rural areas while still offering them access to better opportunities and service they are found in many cities.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you much. The issue of sustainability actually is very interesting in that context. And we have, in a new paper that we are just preparing, we look at that into more detail. While you may see around surrounding the cities a major area of extraction of goods and of resources that we have seen that may lead to disaster, ecological disaster, decline in ecosystem services. You have at the other side, this urban education system that starts to realize that people in the city depend on the quality of their background, of their rural hinterlands. So there is a change of mind happening in the city. People start to realize how dependent things are. Education is usually getting better. So this opportunity would allow also quality of production to play a major role. So you are able to introduce certification systems. And that we see in many of the major cities of the world, being it China, being it also India, that there is labeling occurring that allows city dwellers to connect to the rural and to say, okay, we want to have, for instance, a CO2 footprint on our products to compare. We want to have a water efficiency information being given. And these values of quality that often were not at all a concept before offer opportunities for cities and for city dwellers to contribute to, say, sustainability while, having said all that, while the immediate effect of having so many people together can have devastating effects on the environment. So the challenge, now come to your second question, the second challenge to politicians is major. They cannot look only at the city. They have to take into account also the consequences of the city growth on the environment. And they have to keep both happy, not only the city people that eventually may riot, but also the country people that are intimately linked to the city people through information channels. And we see that in Myanmar as well. If something happens in Mandalay, if something happens on the Shan Plateau, it affects everything across the country and even beyond the country. So this getting closer together by interlinked flows of information and of goods is a threat on the one hand side. On the other hand side, it is an opportunity for a more holistic thinking and policy making. How humanity will solve that is what we need to use in our teaching as a goal, and what politicians and also the economy needs to set the conditions right for.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Prof.
Yes. Mr. Olwin, he is a forest scientist. Yeah, please. Yes.
Hello.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, and for good and plain knowledge sharing platform to organize this kind of very highly and very motivation presentation. So I'm really excited to see the presentation, the theory of probability, right?
Yes.
And yes, at the very spark new idea for us, particularly for me, and both in academic and practical application. So your presentation is really groundbreaking to our idle time in Myanmar because of the Myanmar context. So I would like to ask three questions for the sake of my conversation. So I type in the chat box, in your chat
Okay,
box.
but please, one after
Yeah.
the other. I can be more precise if you are refraining from too many questions at the same time, because my memory is limited.
Okay. So first question is, what are the operationalized for empirical research, especially in the context of Myanmar?
Okay.
How the urbanity can be
Okay.
operationalized for empirical research and empirical research, to design empirical research, especially in the current context of Myanmar?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Well, I would, if I was doing research in Myanmar at the moment, I would be interested in how your cities with a different history in different parts of the country are growing. Let's say a classical city such as Yangon, at the coast with, on the one hand side, the ocean, on the other side, the hinterland, and with a very established structure and also a quite established power structure. And then a city like Myanmar, or as Mandalay, that is much more dynamic, that is Myanmar planned on, let's say, very much a static level. Supposedly, everything is organized. If you look more closely, there are probably major axes that are organized, and in between those, there is free development going on. There is a lot of formal and informal meeting, and this I would like to understand. And then you have a place such as Mandalay that is heavily influenced by demand structures, by telecoupling from China. So it is basically the entry door for the big neighbor, and therefore it has its own logic, and that logic needs to be understood in order to set up a proper research agenda to understand nutrient flows or matter flows. Flows, I mean everything that moves from stones, from bricks to food, to virtual water, to labor, to ideas. In that case, in Mandalay, for instance, the ideas will come mainly from China, because what you produce often goes directly to China. So there is this link that needs to be considered. And then I would see, okay, where are now the most critical resources? Is it water? Probably not an issue in Yangon, but likely an issue in Mandalay, at least during the dry period of the year. So I would stratify, if I look at the research agenda, I would stratify my foci according to the needs of the country and the particularities of the individual city and its hinterland.
Thank you very much. So maybe next question is, so your theory is somehow transformation or blending the rural and urban lifestyle, imperative lifestyle. So nowadays, at the moment, at the meantime, urban and rural are quite different traditionally. So, and also at the same time, there are a lot of external the influence from the neighboring country and Western musics and whatever. So that what are the potential traditional or cultural tension, potential cultural tension arising from the transformation and blending of rural and urban, the transformation and blending lifestyle.
Well, this is interesting because their culture and ethnicity, ethnic affiliation and religious affiliation actually plays a major role. We have studied urbanization, we have studied urbanization phenomena in places, for instance, such as Ladakh or in the Sahara Desert. And what we see is that those marginal places, if you take, for instance, Ladakh, you take Leh as the capital, and you take the rural area that often have no infrastructure at all. You would imagine that everybody who actually can go, can walk, moves at least to Leh, if not moves to lowland India, because labor conditions are much better in lowland India, job opportunities are better, educational opportunities are better. But what you see is something different. People go to lowland India for education and then they return to the marginal lands. They return to Leh and even to smaller cities. Why is that happening? Because there is a feeling of identity. In this particular case, in Ladakh, it is Buddhism in a traditional Hindu or dominated Hindu country of India. So it is the joint social and, if you want, spiritual heritage and tradition that counteracts the pull towards the cities. And in Myanmar, as far as I know Myanmar, sorry, I only have been there about 3 times, and it was years back. I have seen also a very strong Buddhist tradition in the countryside. And I would believe that this is less pronounced in the cities. Although, of course, you still are religious in the cities, but life is going at a different rhythm in the cities than it is in the countryside. So there may be reasons why people remain in the countryside, although their livelihoods materialistically seem to be much better in the cities. And that's something that needs to be understood. And that's all. I mean, you are a multi-ethnic country. People always believe that it's only one nation. No, there is several nations in the Union of Myanmar, which makes also the current political debate much more complex.
Yeah. And
Any
my
more questions?
final question.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Final question. The theory you presented today is urbanity. So a lot of zigzags and also cross-cutting. So for the time being, so very complex complexity situation in the country. So, but not now. Maybe in next time. Maybe in future. So, how to sustainably manage the rural and urban transformation. So there are different aspects. There are many stakeholders are engaged in this transformation. But however, what are the key role of government policy play in managing the sustainability of transformation in rural and urban? And so far your good advice, what we should focus, what sort of government policy to develop? Yeah, thank you.
I cannot give a general recipe, but interestingly enough, what we see is if we look at peri-urban areas where really the rural and the urban meet physically, not in the context only of a gradient, but of course there are also in peri-urban areas, there's all of a sudden agglomerations popping up. We see that there is often a continuous growth. There is sudden growth steps of cities. But what we see when we look at soil quality, we often see that the soil quality there is substantially better than in rural areas. And we have also looked at insect populations in India, at biodiversity of plants and of vertebrates and of invertebrates. And surprisingly, it's in that peri-urban areas where you have the highest biodiversity, and where also you have the highest organic carbon in the soil. You do have that because there is a demand for biodiversity. In the rural countryside, you often only have millet being grown or maize being grown, so it's relatively monotonous. So although there may be less herbicides used than in the peri-urban area, we have more niches in the peri-urban areas where species can survive, species find a market. For instance, people have more diverse food demands, therefore also local food production is more diverse. And this is something that was very much against our expectations, where we would think, okay, in the city, the closer you come, the more monotonous is the landscape, the more monotonous is the insect population. No, no, no. You go and look at bees. Bee diversity is highest in that case of Bangalore, maybe 5 kilometers from the city center, because people there have trees, exotic trees that they brought in over the decades of city growth, and these trees provide feed for bees throughout the year. Whereas in the countryside, you have one season, it's irrigated or it's not irrigated, there's rain or there's no rain, and this determines the environment composition. So what I want to say is our enhanced knowledge about that rural-urban interface and about the interaction between the rural and the urban, this urbanity phenomenon, our knowledge should enable us to design more sustainable cities, but also to better understand and manage what we produce under what conditions for which price in the rural area, because there it comes. If the city dwellers want not only to have convenience a criterion of their livelihood, but also demand ecosystem services, then they must be willing to pay for that. Then we go out of that vicious cycle that agriculture should produce cheaply, cheaply, cheaply. The cheaper, the better. There we come to more holistic understanding of the role of agriculture. And that's what I see as an opportunity.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Myanmar, you go to the countryside that I know, there was for kilometers, there was only rice, 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 paddy, paddy, paddy. Well, this is understandable. That's the classical Southeast Asian crop. But as food demand gets more diverse, you will find more agroforestry system. You will find more change rotation system with beans, for instance. It's not only rice, rice, rice.
Right. Okay, thank you. Sia Utombo.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
My name is Tombo U. I'm also a retired trader from the forest department, and also after retire, I'm working the forestry and environment related NGO. I think thank you. I think very much, Professor Buerkert, your presentation. I think similarly, Professor Olin mentioned that we are very impressed. We heard the urbanity about the new concept of the urban and rural development. Yes, I think my concern is sustainability, city, particularly climate change. I agree with you. City and rural development together. Your result is very impressive. But nowadays, the climate change, reducing the emission from the particularly transportation, handling, that is important for the rural and also urban area. Therefore, I think, can you consider the climate change, particularly reducing emission concept, because some of the rural area a little bit far from the urban area. That's why some of the agriculture product, the transport a long way. There, I reckon that food mile is very important for considering the climate change. That's why your concept is considering the climate change concept is the first question. Another is
okay, stop. I need to go one by one because your
yes.
question is a big one. Sorry, my memory is limited. I do believe that there is, of course, climate change affecting the phenomenon, no doubt about that. And what we can do is we can make food production more efficient in a urban environment, limit transportation, and make first of all sure that the consumer knows how big the CO2 footprint of a particular product is. And we do have in Europe now an obligation until 2030 that all products that we buy in shops must have an information on the CO2 footprint. Now, whether the consumer really makes his decisions dependent on this characterization of the footprint or not, we will see. Because often we see that the consumer demands that, and finally he or she chooses the cheapest product regardless of what carbon footprint it has. So that's not yet clear, but in principle, we have that possibility to enhance efficiency and to use the consumer's views and the consumer's market demand to change, to make agricultural systems resource use efficient. The same, of course, can be for water. So the water footprint, the virtual water that a product contains can be figured out and can become a decision criterion on the market. On the other hand, what we see is that many big cities, as they grow, they also incorporate food production areas. Actually, the largest city in the world is Tokyo, Yokohama. And interesting enough, it is increasingly, when you are going beyond the 30 million inhabitants, enormous cities, right? Larger than Beijing, rather larger than Mexico City, which are the other one that are real big. These cities have intensive agricultural areas in between the different city parts. So it seems to be that there is a limit to the efficiency of telecoupling. Not everything comes from around the world. And this is a phenomenon that should be considered when we plan future cities, so that we don't assume that everything is being shipped in for risk purposes. Let's say a typhoon comes, a big monsoon comes and blocks the roads. Then where are we getting our food from? Or that we have a war, we see that at the moment, and international trade is hampered. Where do we get our rice from? So I'm not saying that necessarily urbanization, the phenomenon of becoming urban, leads to enhanced resilience against climate change. But I'm saying that the threats that are there for urbanization can be managed, can be tackled in an information-driven urban society. And there is no excuse now anymore. Oh, I am in the countryside. I have no idea how complex things are. My decisions really are not important. No, as a city dweller, you have all the information, you have the resources, you have the infrastructure to make wise, sustainable decisions. Of whether humanity takes up that challenge or whether we don't, that's something that the next generation has to decide. But I think that's an advantage of the urbanization phenomenon in the wake of climate change.
Yes, I think thank you. The first question, but second question is, I think I came across the milk production. Therefore, I think can you consider the emission from the livestock also in your the theory or in your analytical frameworks? Thank you.
Well, there is a big debate, of course, on livestock, and there come now issues of whether we should limit the amount of livestock production in the world. And I would say there is no clear-cut answer. Of course, there is a big difference in the CO2 footprint of, let's say, chicken versus beef versus pigs. And there is also a big difference in terms of what food items they need, what feed items they need, and what the competition is between direct human feed consumption and food consumption via the animal. We all know that what we are doing at the moment, feeding ruminants with grain, and 95% of the global maize yield go actually into feeding of into grain feeding of chicken, of pigs, and of cattle, and that's certainly not sustainable. That is not wise. That is what I always call the biggest scandal that we have in worldwide food distribution. Tremendous meat consumption on the basis of grain diets. But there are areas in the world where you can do nothing else than growing meat. Let's look at Mongolia, for instance, a country that has very difficult rainfall situation, has huge grazing lines that only can be used for animals. Yet we don't have enough market access to skim off the animals that are produced sustainably in Mongolia. Because of diseases, because of trade barriers, because of political issues, Mongolia cannot offer the world its feed resources, its grasses converted to animal meats. Now, I'm not saying that we all should now eat meat from Mongolia. All I'm saying is we should look on how we produce our meat, what the meat price should be, and certainly higher than it is at present. Our meat is much too cheap worldwide. We are not taking account of the ecological damage that our feeding systems make, and also of the frequency of meat that we eat. In the Western world, much too much meat. But not only in the Western world. If you go to city populations in China, they even eat more meat than we do in the Western world. So let's say more informed decision-making on how our future diets look like. They don't have to be all vegan. I would say a little bit more vegetarian traditions in a diet would not harm. Eating meat once a week is more than enough. Even eating meat every 2 weeks is still good.
Okay.
So thinking of what we eat and where we get what we eat from and under what conditions it is being produced, and tailoring that by political decision-making, such as taxation, for instance, or environmental laws, or laws on how many animals to put on 1 hectare, is certainly a way of governing sustainability.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, any question from other participants? We still have Dr. Mamomi or Dr. Mamaju or Tin. Can you say hello? Because she is in Mon State.
Hello.
Yes, please.
I want to ask a question.
Yes, please.
And please, thank you, Dr. Mutue. I'm Kamancho from.
Yeah. You are asking from. You
Yes.
are joining from US. Is that right? Okay, please. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, please.
Yes. I want to appreciate the doctor presentation. I have new knowledge and up-to-date research, and thank you so much for your platform. And Dr. Professor, our country is Burma, Myanmar. As you told about in this section, Africa, but when we ask a question, you told about us, the India system, Indian practice. Shall we, therefore, I want to ask a question is, shall we practice like the India agricultural system? Because India is the fifth biggest power in our world now. Therefore, is it right or wrong Please answer to me. Thank you so much.
Well, that is a very political question, and I would like to take that from the agricultural point of view.
Yes.
I do believe that India, first of all, there is no one India, right? I have had over the last 15 years the pleasure to get to know many parts of India. And what we have seen is, on the one hand side, in particular in the last years, an intensification of rural-urban linkages. So there is a big value-driven change where we have a middle class that is aware of branding, that they buy organic products, they buy products from natural sources that are close by. There is a lot of certification going on, not only for international schemes, but also for local schemes. So I think the India food market is developed towards a quality food market. And I think that is an interesting phenomenon if you think about 1.4 billion people. On the other hand side, there's also a religious focus on biodiversity and on natural agriculture, very much related to Hinduism.
Yes.
Everything that is now on the political side, whether the central policies are effectively supporting that or are in some cases may even preventing more sustainable land use systems, is something that would need to be discussed at a finer scale. I give you one example. In the South Indian state of Kerala, there is a tiger reserve. And I have recently had a pleasure to see that tiger reserve. And there was a very strict focus on the tiger as a landmark animal, a flagship species that needs to be protected under all means now, while the area was also ideally suited to growing tea and was providing jobs for hundreds of thousands of people growing tea. So the general politics was to make the place that since colonial time has been covered with tea plantations, to make it a park, a Western, I would say, Western style park where nothing goes but tigers and related animals. So absolutely no cultivation of land, stop getting the tea plantation out. And I think that in a world where resources are scarce, where land resources are scarce, we may want to be more flexible and trying to politically discuss and look for land uses that allow both, that allow maintenance of ecosystem services and agricultural production. Because still, the world's population is growing. It's slower of the growth than it used to be the last 20 years. But the absolute numbers that we are adding each year are larger than ever. So despite a lower growth rate, given the higher level we have to start from, puts tremendous stress on resources. So in summary, I think there are some elements that are interesting in India. There are some elements that we have gone to appreciate in West Africa, where I have been working for a long time as well. So it's not the political system that is better or worse, it's the elements in the systems that need to be discovered and properly combined and properly discussed about in the context of the resource constraints and the political system at a particular location.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Blueprint.
Mr.
India
Professor.
is no blueprint for the world. I think we should be very careful on that, because that's what the colonial powers also believed before. Whatever was good in Britain was good for the rest of the Commonwealth.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other,
Thank you so much.
any other
Professor.
question? We still
Thank
have
you.
time, so one or two. Thank you. So you in your maybe morning in the US, I think.
Did you get and distribute the paper that I sent you about urbanity?
Yes. The
Okay.
paper, yeah.
Okay.
Your paper is I have
Yep.
circulated.
Okay.
And then we will also make it to announce to broadcast in the Facebook tomorrow.
No problem.
And then also YouTube.
Yes, it would be good to have the broadcast link for us to
Yeah.
have
I'll send it to you.
a little record about the
Yes,
phenomenon. Yep.
Yes, maybe. Any other question? One or two questions?
If you have questions later, you can always send me them by email. I will try to.
Email also. Tin, can you speak? No? Oh, yes.
Oh,
Tin
Tim.
is there. I asked her to contact her because she has a some.
That's
Yes, please.
so. Yeah.
Hello, Tim.
Thank you so much, my professor, Professor Buerkert. Deeply thanks for your sharing, update knowledge, and then especially the research. So, but currently our country situation is very limited. Now I am in a remote area, but I'm trying to connect to listen to your sharing knowledge. Currently our country, especially now you are talking is sustainability for the all, including India, Africa, and so on. But our also target is we would like to go into the sustainable because of our formal our discussions in your talk. So, but currently now I am conducting the airline project assessments in one state. Especially, I found that the political issue is very important for going the sustainable way to addressing the current everything problem. So that's why in a peaceful future, we have to talk and then you have the sharings and then now so we got some idea how to develop the question to conduct the research in Myanmar. Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. Now I'm very interested how about the agroecology system in Myanmar, especially not only the agriculture, but also the fisherization. And then we already conduct the land use transformation. This is also very important one factor, linkage with the sustainability. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Now, there's one interesting phenomenon you just mentioned. That's the principle of agroecology. That is, I would say, Miguel Altieri and Steve Gleesman in the 1990s and in the early 2000s have quite powerfully introduced that into the agricultural intensification debate. And I see that there is a tremendous repercussion of those principles all around the world. I do see that China is talking about green agriculture. Now, green agriculture is difficult to define often, but it at least takes some of the principles of diversity and of resource use efficiency from natural system into human-made intensive agricultural production. And I do see that there is a consideration, at least, to limit negative environmental effects of intensification on ecosystem services. This is particularly true for eutrophication. China has made major strides in reducing waste of nitrogen, the waste of urea by, for instance, using coated urea or by having multiple application rather than a single application, but also by certification schemes that allow farmers to make more money from certified products. So quantity is in a balance with quality. And when I look back 20 years back, when I first came, for instance, to China, my colleagues were telling me, well, you can talk here about everything, but not about organic agriculture. It's kind of exotic. We are still focused very much on production. So the principles of agroecology need to be properly understood, tailored to systems, and be combined with intensification so that we have eco-intensification principles that allow both fully organic production for a particular part of the society that has that market, and also for the large majority of the people who may not be willing to pay that much or who are not that interested in diversity, that they also get a product that has a lesser ecological footprint than the products that we are offering too cheaply today.
Thank you. Maybe we have a connection problem, Professor Buerkert.
I think, did you get my comments? I got yours.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then is it okay?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe she is a internet problem.
I think she has a problem.
Yeah, any one or two more questions? Doctor, you have all, Dr. Mamaju or Dr. Doctor, you have one more question? Yes, please.
Yeah, since there's a time, let me ask another question. Yeah, it's related to the Myanmar situation as well. Okay, in the context of the urbanity, right, where rural and the urban areas are increasingly interlinked, that's what we said the whole night. Okay, what role, Prof, do you see for our local governments and the community organizations in Myanmar to ensure that the rural regions, those village countryside, benefit from our city or urban development, especially in terms of infrastructure and social services? Thank you.
Okay, well, Myanmar, of course, has at the problem the situation that you are in the midst of a civil war. Debate between urban interests and rural interests are severely hampered, severely affected by that. And therefore, you have a very particular situation. You also have a particular situation because the ecosystem services that agriculture provides other than food production, such as, for instance, tourism, leisure, relaxation, for the moment cannot be marketed, right? People cannot go into northern Shan State and enjoy biodiversity there. It's not the time to do that. And I think this is something that the ecological implications of a civil war and of political unrest are tremendous. And they can last for decades after the civil war has long ended. And you may have much more information, but for instance, the current political status, the disastrous security issue, and this very difficult debate that's going on, what implications that has for erosion, for instance. That you have a government that cannot anymore in the entire country implement, for instance, certain measures to limit erosion, because there is no government agents that are there. The state is not functioning. It's all on a survival track. So that's something that in Myanmar needs to be considered, and which certainly I would like to discuss with the government and with the universities also at a larger level.
Sure, you are 100% correct. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last question. Do you have, we still have one last question, or you don't have a question or discussion? No more?
No need to be polite by asking questions that you don't have.
Okay. Anyway, I will give it to you, your link and Zoom link, Facebook link and YouTube link. Thank you so much, Professor Buerkert. Yeah, hope to see you.
Thank you, for your untiring commitment to science and to education.
Yes, I try my best until this will be stopped by someone. Otherwise, we will continue. Before we close our webinar, do you have any announcement for the next week? Because we have an alternative program. You can announce it. Yes.
စိတ်ဝင်စားဖို့ကောင်းပါတယ်ဆရာဗမာနိုင်ငံမှာဒီ carbon project ကိုသူတို့ပထမဦးဆုံးဆောင်ရွက်နေပါ Waview International ကလေ
Okay.
သူတို့တနင်္လာရီတိုင်းပဲမှာလေ
We'll have a look, we will listen so you can announce. Thank you so much. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Dr. Buerkert, hope to see you in Germany or in Yangon. Okay.
We hope either
Very,
one,
very soon.
either one
Thank
will
you.
be
Thank
possible.
you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Prof.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yeah,
Thank you, Professor. Have a nice trip.
Thank you for your attention.